Morning, everyone. Hope you are well. Looks like we got a couple in this morning already. Hi, Martin and Steph. How you doing? Cool. Right. I know Monday again. Yeah, it's. I don't know where these weeks are going. It's a sign of getting old, isn't it? Mind you, even my kids are saying it now. Right. Let's get you going. So last week we looked at the inguinal ligament and the pathway of structures that go through the ligament that may cause hernias. And this week, we're going to have a look at the primarily the abdominal wall. And obviously, that links in with what we did with the inguinal ligament last week. And if we've got time, we'll start to add on some of the layers of muscle posteriorly as well on the lumbar spine. So yeah, that's the plan for today. Morning, Claire. Good to see you in as well. And yeah, so we've over the next couple of weeks we should do the whole kind of cylinder that is the muscles around the lumbar spine. Or muscles attached to the lumbar spine, and that was something we used to discuss quite a bit about core muscles and what core muscles are, and I guess if you were going to define it, they should be. I don't think there is a definition, but muscles that attach to the lumbar spine, that would kind of make sense. But we tend to think of core muscles as just the kind of abdominal region rather than anything else. So maybe kind of change your view on what the core is if you've not really looked into it before. And yeah, like I said, I don't think there is a definition, so we can kind of make one up. Morning, Al. Good to see you, mate. Right, let's get going then. So this is obviously an area we deal a heck of a lot with. Kind of bread and butter, really. People coming in with lumbar spine issues, pain around that region. Sometimes, though, it's quite interesting when people say they've got back pain, and when they actually point to it, it's nowhere near their back. It's usually kind of buttock sort of area, so buttock plane, sacroiliac joint region, rather than their lumbar spine. So, and that's a good thing to know your anatomy for, definitely, because obviously the people coming to us, they Google their symptoms often, and then we'll get their own diagnosis of some terrible disease. So it's useful to allay fears sometimes and show them the anatomy and say, well, look, this area here that's really sore that you're poking there, and that bit that's tender, that's not actually your back. So that's a real good sign. So it's yeah, you can use this information to kind of calm people's worries. Sometimes, though, if there is a clinical problem, then it's a good way to for you as a practitioner to kind of work things out. Good morning, Penny and Carol. Good morning. I've got a right crew in this morning. That's good. It's funny with there are certain topics that people love, like the sacral plexus. We had a few people in. Muscles of the lumbar spine, loads of people live. So yeah, I don't blame you, mind. You need to kind of sit on your own in a dark room and watch this sacral plexus, I think. Okay, so let's get you guys going. So we're going to have a look at the anterior musculature first, and the kind of abdominal region, if you like. So the muscles at the front, kind of six-pack area. Let's just get rid of that so we can see everything. There we go. And something that I just wanted to introduce you to, because we'll kind of touch on this as we go through. There is something called the arcuate line in the abdominal wall. And when we get to the rectus abdominis muscle, which is your six-pack muscle, will be able to see, well, you can kind of see it. You'll be able to differentiate between different sections of this of the abdominal wall. So if I just introduce you to this now, just so you've kind of got it sewn in your brain, and then we'll, as we go through, hopefully it will start to make a bit more sense when we kind of finish this section. So there are some key bits on here, and there may be some muscles that you've heard about before. And if you haven't, don't worry, because we're going to go over them. Just make that a bit smaller there. There we go. Okay, so we've got section A and section B. Okay, section A is above something that we call the arcuate line. Okay, and section B is below the. Is that right? Yeah, I'm just making sure it's the right round. B is below the arcuate line. Okay, so this section here, or the above this line, and obviously it will be slightly different for everybody, but on the whole, it's in the same kind of place. So above this line, which is around about the level of your belly button, just underneath your belly button. So if you've got your six-pack muscles, you've got those rectangular shaped muscles all stacked up on each other, and the lower abdominal is, or the lower part of the rectus abdominis, that six-pack wall, is they're actually longer muscles, so they're more like two triangles, but attaching to the pubic bone, and it's around that region, so kind of lower abs, you would call it if you're kind of fitness background, is those lower abs that we're talking about. So the reason why I'm showing you this, not just with anatomical fascination, but it's because of the clinical implications of this arcuate line. So because the structure of the way the muscles attach to each other down the middle of the body, so where the belly button is different from the upper portion to the lower portion, and that's clinically significant because of a risk of herniation. Okay, so again, we're talking hernias again after the inguinal ligament last time. So if we have a look here, we've got three muscle layers, and we'll go into the names of these muscles as we go along. Yeah, but we'll kind of add those in at a later date. So we've got in your abdominal wall, and we've got three layers of muscles. So this is a cross-sectional view. So it's like someone's sliced through a body and you're looking from the top down. Okay, so we've got these three layers here, and then we've got that muscle there and that muscle there, and those are the rectus abdominis muscles. Those are your six-pack rectangles that are clearly visible on everyone. So what we've got then is, can you see this up most superficial muscle has got a layer of connective tissue, and we were talking about that last week. We're talking about an aponeurosis, so it's like a very flat tendon basically. Okay, we'll show you a picture in a second. So this most superficial muscle, the aponeurosis, or the flat tendon, goes over the top of your rectus abdominis muscle and then attaches to the one on the opposite side and joins in the middle. And it joins in the middle. So this is the dip in the middle of the rectus abdominis wall, and it's called the linea alba, which means white line. Okay, so linea obviously line, and then alba means white. So linea alba, the white line down the middle, is a piece of connective tissue. Okay, so it's like a bit of tendon. Okay, from the muscles on the side. And then if we have a look at the next one down, the connective tissue. So this again is the same kind of stuff, but this time it splits. And this one here, half of it goes around the front of rectus abdominis, half of it goes around the back. So your six-pack muscles here. And then it all attaches in the middle again, okay, in this linea alba. And then the deepest one here, this one just goes posteriorly, attaches in the middle, and then obviously joins in with this one here. So above that kind of lower six-pack area, so part of your eight-pack really, If you look at bodybuilders, they're 8-packs rather than 6-packs. So those lower triangular ones, they don't have this setup. Yeah, so they don't have it where the fascia goes over the front, around it, and around the back. Okay, what they have is this. Okay, so this is what it looks like in that lower portion of the abdomen. So instead of them wrapping around and going around the back of the rectus abdominis, what we've got here is they all go over the front. Okay, so it's continuous all the way down, it just shifts. Okay, so the connective tissue shifts to the front of your 6-pack muscles rather than being surrounding it. So if you have a look here, so the most superficial one goes around the front, the middle one goes around the front, and the deepest one goes around the front as well. Yeah, whereas here, superficial does go around the front, so that's the same, but this middle one splits into two and envelops that muscle, and the deepest one goes around the back. Yeah, so you'll notice here there's no connective tissue from these muscles around the back of the rectus abdominis, your 6-pack muscles in the lower portion. So that point at which it switches is called the arcuate line. Okay, and like I said, that's important clinically, because here, behind these here, so if you have a look on this one, we've got connective tissue posteriorly, connective tissue from this one posteriorly, then we've got a layer of fascia, and then we've got something called the peritoneum, which is another layer of connective tissue, and then behind that orange line is your guts. Okay, so all the visceral region, so all your small intestines in this case. Whereas in the lower part of the abdomen, there's no connective tissue around the back; it's just the layers of fascia. Okay, so transversalis fascia and the parietal peritoneum. So you can see, hopefully, that if there is a problem with this part of the abdominal wall, then the stomach contents, or not stomach contents, but the intestines can more easily pass through and break through into the abdominal region. Okay, and that's where you're likely to get a herniation. So yeah, just wanted to show you that initially, and then we'll kind of unpick these layers. Okay, so we'll have a look at each of the layers. So just move me out of the way. This is the deepest of the layers. So if we go back to that one, so this one here, that there, that's called the transverse abdominis, and there it is there, look, or transversus abdominis, sometimes it's called. So it's the abdominal muscle that goes across, so transverse abdominis. So that's the innermost muscle and then connective tissue. Yeah, so that's what this one is here. So if we have a look, it's got attachments all along the kind of costal cartilage of the ribs. Yeah, there you go. So ribs 7 to 12, costal cartilage. There's something called the thoracolumbar fascia, which we'll have a look at when we get to the posterior aspect of the lumbar spine. The internal iliac crest, so around this area here. Okay, so there's your iliac crest, and we covered that when we looked at the pelvis. And the transverse abdominis will attach on the inside of that crest. And then the inguinal ligament, which is what we looked at last week. So the bottom part of the transverse abdominis will attach onto that ligament. And if you remember from last week, there is a gap in that attachment just there. Okay, and that is where the round ligament in females comes through, or the spermatic cord in males comes through. Okay, and then through to the front of the body around the pubic region. So yeah, so that's the kind of look that you would see in the textbooks. So we've got this really broad, flat sheet of muscle. It's arranged in a horizontal direction. So if the muscle contracts, then what it does is it kind of provides kind of what we call what would you call it? It's to do with hoop stresses. So when you say if your intestine wall was pushing out against this muscle, it would contract to make sure that it doesn't go any further, basically. Okay, so it provides like a solid ring around that lumbar spine. And yeah, there was a study done ages ago by I think it's Craig Hodges. It was in the late 90s. I think it was about 98. And this is when the stability ball craze went mad. So what his research showed was that people who had lower back pain had a delayed transverse abdominis recruitment. So what then the fitness industry did, and some of the physio world and Pilates world, they extrapolated from that well, if you then train the transverse abdominis to recruit it so that the timing is good, then you won't have back pain. And that's not what the study said. It just basically picked up the fact that there was altered recruitment with people that were in pain. So yeah, and then everybody was on a stability ball, doing all sorts of exercises, and everybody had to brace before you had to pick up a piece of paper. And it's taken a while to get rid of that kind of thought process of over bracing, when actually you just need to relax and let your body do what it needs to do. Okay, so yeah, so that this muscle and the study around this muscle has caused us some issues over the years. So this is what it looks like. Just make sure we get the right one. Where has it gone? There they are. Hopefully this will start playing now. Let me just get these stacked up. Bear with me a sec. I've got about 50 videos lined up. Here we go. Right. Okay, so transverse abdominis. Here we are. Okay, just gonna pause that there. Morning, Tris. Good question, Penny. Do we know if there's a reason for the change in layering from above and below? One of them is thought to be because of the blood supply to the lower abdomen, and the lower muscles receive their blood supply at the level of the arcuate line. So potentially that's why. Other than that, I'm not really sure, to be honest. Just one of those embryological things. So these are the muscles we were talking about before. So these are your six pack muscles. There's the linea alba, so that's your white line. Yeah, just there. This muscle here, this is your transverse abdominis. So can you see unfortunately it's on the other side of the body, but we've got the muscle fibers here, and then they change into connective tissue or tendon fibers around here, and then they'll join underneath your six pack. And there's a couple of other layers as well, which we've just seen, and it will attach to this white line, but deep to it. Okay, so that's where we're attaching to. Just play. Is that going to play? No. Bear with me a sec. There we go. So yeah, there's a nice flat tendon. Just going to see if that works on the pause. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so the transverse muscle fibers, they go across, and obviously it's the same on the other side as well. So they both meet in the middle, and then we've got this long flat tendon or aponeurosis in the middle there. So there's your rectus abdominis muscle. So we've got attachment to the ribs. Oh, there you go. It's on the, oh no, it's on the same side. There we go. And then around the iliac crest, on the inside of that iliac crest, and then down onto the inguinal ligament. So all along those ribs there, that's all transverse abdominis. And this is the deepest layer of the abdominal wall. Yeah, so along rib 6 or 7 to 12, and then you've got thoracolumbar fascia at the back, which is a big piece of connective tissue on the back of the lumbar spine, along the iliac crest, and then attaching underneath these rectus abdominis muscles here. So we've got the inguinal ligament on the lateral part, so there's a gap on the medial part, and that's again where the round ligament and the spermatic cord come through, and we had a look at that last week. And then here's the flat tendon here. So this is the transverse aponeurosis. So the aponeurosis that goes across. Okay, it merges with the internal oblique, and we've seen that on that first picture of where everything knits in together. And that level there is around about the level of the arcuate line. Okay, let me just go back there. Okay, so see that there, that if I just pause that there. So we've got your six-pack muscles here, and then there's a bit of a connective tissue, bit of tendon, and then another six-pack muscle, bit of connective tissue, and then this long one, the last one. So it's around that level there for these last, the lower abdominal muscles. That's where the arcuate line is, around that region there. Okay. Okay, so yeah, merges with the internal oblique. That's what IO means. We'll have a look at that in a second. And then, yeah, around that level there is the arcuate line. And again, we'll see that as we go through. Okay, cool. So that's your deepest layer. So if I just go back one, so that's this one here. Okay, so that's that layer there. So in the upper part of the abdomen, it goes around the back of the rectus abdominis. In the lower part of the abdomen, which you'll see in a second, they've cut a lot of it away on that first dissection. So when we have a look at the rectus abdominis with all of the tissue in place, you'll be able to see the sheath going across the top. And that there it is there. So that's the lower one, so transverse abdominis there, and this time the connective tissue going over the top. Okay, and then connecting in the middle for the linea alba. Cool. Okay, so that's transverse. Then we've got internal oblique. So this is the next layer. Very, very similar to the transverse abdominis, except the direction of the fibers is slightly different. Okay, so with the transverse, they go straight across. The oblique will, the internal oblique will kind of fan out. Yeah, so we've got fibers coming down, fibers coming across, and fibers going up. Yeah, commonly known as the kind of like twisty rotation muscle. Okay, so yeah, flexes the trunk, laterally flexes the trunk, rotates the trunk, and again compresses the internal organs. So obviously there's another one on the other side, and they connect together via that white line, that linea alba. And when they both contract on both sides, you're going to get a compressive tightening effect of the abdominal wall. Okay, so the attachment points are very similar to the transverse abdominis. So thoracolumbar fascia, thoracolumbar aponeurosis, the iliac crest, and the inguinal ligament. So pretty much exactly the same. So let's have a look at this one, if I can find it again. We want that one. Okay, so this is the internal oblique. And this is that next layer up. Okay, so we just had a look at the deepest layer. This is the one in the middle, the internal oblique. And there it is there. Okay, so let me just go back a bit, just to there. So what you're going to see first of all is the previous image of the transverse abdominis. And then immediately you're going to see the internal oblique layered on top of that. Okay, so I'll just pause it at the right top. So that is what we just seen. Yeah, so that's transverse abdominis with the rectus abdominis there as well. Okay, so there's the transverse and the aponeurosis. What we're just about to see is the internal oblique coming in, and there it is there. Okay, so hopefully you can see we've got this additional layer, so muscle tissue again, and then connective tissue, this flat aponeurosis, but it's layered on top of the transverse abdominis. Okay, but now can you see as well, you can't see your six-pack muscles. Yeah, they've been covered up. So the rectus abdominis is underneath there. So now we're starting to get the difference in the connective tissue layers, okay, and where they pass through. So here's your internal obliques. very, very similar kind of attachment points. So we've got right around the back, thoracolumbar fascia, along the iliac crest. That's often a really tender area, isn't it, along there? And then we've got this piece of connective tissue, and then the inguinal ligament, and there's a gap there as well. So if you remember from last week, there was a gap, again, where the round ligament and the spermatic cord come through, okay? And each layer has its opening at a different place along the inguinal ligament, because if they were all in the same place, there would be no protection and your guts could just come out. Yeah, but because it's arranged in layers and you've got one opening and then another one and then another one, then it's less likely to herniate, although it is very common in that region. So yeah, there's your attachment on the inguinal ligament. This is the arrangement of the muscle, so it's like a fan, okay, coming around. So you've got muscle fibers going up, and then muscle fibers coming across, muscle fibers coming straight across, and then muscle fibers coming down. Yeah, so we've got that fan shape arrangement of these internal obliques. So it's funny because some people say that internal goes one way and external goes the other, but internal kind of goes always. Yeah, it fans around the whole abdominal region rather than just going in one particular direction. And then we've got the aponeurosis, so the flat tendon. So we're back to this picture again. This is the middle layer this time, okay? And it merges with the transverse abdominis underneath to perform the posterior sheath. And that cut edge there is the external oblique that's been cut just there. Okay, so above the arcuate line, the internal oblique and the transverse abdominis pass behind the rectus abdominis muscles, but then below it, they pass in front. There we go. Okay, just pause that there. So above the arcuate line, the internal oblique and the transverse abdominis pass behind the rectus, so like this one here. Okay, so there's your transverse, there's the internal. Both of those are going behind the rectus abdominis and then attaching in the middle. Below that line, the internal and transverse abdominis pass in front of the rectus. So there, this one. There's your internal, there's your transverse abdominis, and this time they go in front. Okay, so there. So the only thing behind is the transversalis fascia and the peritoneum. Okay, so your arcuate line is around that area there. So your belly button around there. So it's just below your belly button. Okay. So hopefully that first image is starting to make a bit more sense. Fingers crossed. Okay, so last one for this region. Sorry, two more. Then we've got external obliques. So this is the most superficial one. Yeah, really, really big, flat sheet of muscle and tendon. Okay, big aponeurosis. The fiber direction in this one is fairly constant. So we've got a kind of like putting your hands in your pockets kind of direction. So we're from a superior to inferior direction. And this is what I mean. So sometimes people say external obliques are hands in your pockets and then internal obliques are the other way, but it doesn't really work like that. So external obliques are more superior to inferior, but the internal kind of fan. So it depends on which part of the internal oblique you're looking at as to which direction the fibers go. Very, very similar in terms of function. Okay, so we've got flexes the trunk, laterally flexes if one side is activating, rotates the trunk and compresses your internal organs. So, but again, very, very similar kind of actions. So let's have a look at that one. So external oblique. Here we go. So this is the most superficial, the one that's just underneath the skin. So there's your external oblique. You can see that the fiber direction is in a downward direction this time rather than fanning out. So underneath here, if I just pause that there. So if you think about those layers we've just seen, so underneath these external obliques, you've then got the internal oblique. And then underneath that, you've then got the transverse abdominis. So we've got these 3 layers that are around this this area, okay, all through here. And now this is the most superficial. So look at the connection now. Yeah, again, you can't see your rectus abdominis because it's covered in the what's called the rectus sheath. So the connective tissue that covers the rectus abdominis. You can just about make them out underneath there. Okay, so you can clearly see the muscles and then where they change into tendon, attaching onto the ribs. Very similar at the top there, if I just pause that there, to the serratus, the serrated edge of the serratus anterior. And the serratus actually kind of merges into these external obliques. So you can see serratus just here, okay? And it kind of fills the gap that the external obliques leave, yeah? So they kind of knit together. Yeah, so there we go. So that's serratus anterior, and then there's your external oblique. So it's just kind of merging from one into the other. You see the direction of the fibers of serratus as well, are basically a continuation of your external oblique. There's the thoracolumbar fascia around the back. We've got attachments a little bit higher up on the ribs. Yeah, so the rib cages are kind of underneath there. In fact, you can just see there. Yeah, so it covers quite a bit of those lower part of the ribs. It forms the outer layer of the rectus sheath. So we can see that there. So underneath there, you've got your internal oblique and your transverse abdominis aponeurosis as well. Okay, so all of those layers of connective tissue. There's the linea alba down the front, ASIS at the front, and then pubic tubercle just there as well. So your inguinal ligament would be around here. And again, we've got that arcuate line. So if I just go back, just get rid of those bits, go on to that last bit. There we go. So yeah, around this area here, this is where the arcuate line would be. Okay, so everything coming around the front in this lower abdominal region, and then in the uppers, it's split. And you can kind of see that with what you can see underneath. So can you see you can kind of make out the muscle tissue where you can make out the muscle tissue here. It's a bit darker there. And that's because there's only half of the connective tissue from internal, external, and transverse abdominis. Whereas here, all 3 of them are around the front. So you can't really see it, yeah? It's all around that area there. And you can't make out those muscles underneath, or not as well anyway in this particular case. Okay. Cool. So that's your external oblique. And then the thing that joins it all together is your rectus abdominis. So here we are here. We had a good good chat the other day, and I'm gonna change my slides. It's going to be a bit of a mission because there's hundreds of these, where it's origin and insertion, and then action, nerve, artery. So that's what those are all for. But we're trying to get away from using origin and insertion. Okay, so the definition of them was that the origin was the fixed point, and the insertion was the bit that moved. But the problem is, like with something like rectus abdominis, it depends what you're doing. So if we have a look here, we've got flex is the trunk. Let's stick with that one. Okay, so basically like in a sit-up, you're going to be using this muscle. So it attaches on the ribs, and it also attaches on the pubis. So if you flex your trunk from the top, then this is the bit that moves, and that's the bit that stays still. If you flex it from the bottom, so you roll your pelvis backwards, then this is the bit that moves, and that's the bit that stays still. So which bit's the origin and which bit's the insertion, it changes, and it depends on what kind of movement you're doing. So that's why we're moving away from origins and insertions and just calling them attachments. So this would be the costal attachment, and this would be the pubic attachment. Or you can, in this case, you can use superior and inferior. Okay, so it's they're kind of interchangeable then, and a bit more accurate than saying origin and insertion. So we can see what we've already seen on some of the images. We've got the muscle tissue here, then there's a bit of tendon tissue, then muscle, and so on. And then we've got this longer muscle down the bottom here, at the lower part of the abdomen region. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Let's get rid of those, bring that one up. Okay, so six-pack muscle, rectus abdominis. I'll just pause that there. There we go. So everyone's got a six-pack. It just depends what's in front of it. Okay. So obviously these are the muscles that we're talking about. So these muscles here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and then obviously same on the other side. So those are the kind of six-pack, and then these lower ones are these ones here. Okay. And like I said, it's this region here where that arcuate line is. So covering that lower abdominal region. So yeah, there's your six-pack muscles. So obviously no connective tissue on this one. Transverse abdominis underneath. Yeah, so we've got narrow at the bottom, wide at the top. So, but rectus just basically means like a straight line. Yeah, so like rectus femoris. So there's the rectus coming all the way from the ribs. Yeah, it's divided into sections. So we've got these tendinous sections in between. And then hopefully we'll be able to see just underneath where it attaches to stuff in a second. Here we go. So there's your belly button. And then if we peel back rectus, that's what it's like underneath. Okay, so we've got the posterior rectus sheath. So it's made up of tendons from internal oblique and the transverse abdominis. Except for around that area there. There it is there, look. Okay, so there's the arcuate line. So this lower portion doesn't have as many layers of fascia. The only fascia is the transversalis and the peritoneum, which is the kind of lining of the viscera. So here we go. There's the anterior rectus. So this is made up of the internal oblique and the external oblique. So all the way down the top. And there it is there. So they've cut through it in this case. But it's not just resting there, it's attached. It's like solid. Okay, so to dissect that off would take ages. Okay, and you can just see the rectus abdominis muscles that we kind of know. There we go, being revealed there. And then there's the posterior sheath just underneath there. So if you did that lower down, you wouldn't be able to see that sheath because it wouldn't be there. You cut through the front bit fascia and there would just be transversalis fascia and then peritoneum. So there's the linea alba all the way down the middle. I'm going to play that again because that was pretty cool. Okay, so there's a rectus abdominis, all the six-pack muscles, transverse abdominis underneath. Yeah, narrow at the bottom, wide at the top. So your attachment on the ribs is a lot wider than lower down. So attaching onto your pubic tubercles, just there. So it can be, in fact, I had a patient in the other day, but basically got hit by a car on his bike. Well, just before the car hit him, he slid and then tried to turn away. And because his feet were in cleats in the pedals, he was managed to get one leg free, but just kind of injured all of the groin and everything. And there's a tear down here on the rectus abdominis. So yeah, where it attaches on the pubic tubercle. So remember we were saying about inguinal ligament herniations and then sportsman's hernias. So usually sportsman's hernias are to do with the adductors, but you could also have rectus abdominis tears that will give you pubic pain Okay, so yeah, that area there can, in a traumatic injury like that, can get injured as well. Yeah, so we've got these tendinous intersections in between each of the muscles, transverse abdominis underneath, and then we'll start to have a look at the layers again. So if we peel back this, there's the posterior sheath, just there. And then you can see where it just starts to thin out around there. Okay, so the posterior sheath stops, right? And then that's where so that area there will just be transversalis fascia and then the peritoneal wall just in there. So you can see it's not as tough as this area here. So it's a little bit more flimsy. And then as we start to add on the other layer, so this is the anterior part of the rectus sheath, so this front part here, and then this lower part is all anterior, okay? And then they've cut through, so you can see the rectus abdominis underneath, but again, it's really securely kind of fastened to that muscle tissue. So really, really tough stuff. And then here they've dissected it away so they can peel it back. And there you go. So there's your rectus, and then underneath there you can see the posterior sheath. Okay, but that, like I say, that won't be available or visible in the lower part because it would just be the transversalis fascia then. Linea alba down the middle, and then attaching into your belly button. So xiphoid process down to pubis, and that's your rectus abdominis. Cool. I think we will call it there because I don't want to start another bit just yet. Cool. So, but yeah, next week then we'll have a look at the posterior muscles. So we'll have a look at the small muscles that surround the spine, so the deep ones, and then we'll have a look at the more superficial ones as well as we go through. Some of the muscles will be related to the shoulder region, okay, because of the attachment points. And yeah, so we'll kind of grab some of the information that we looked at previously when we looked at the shoulder, and some of it will be when we look at the anterior musculature, so things like psoas and iliacus, those obviously attach into the lumbar spine as well. So we've got all of these attachments coming into the lumbar spine, as well as the abdominal wall that we've just seen today. Okay, cool. Just make sure there's no more questions. Perfect. Right, I will see you next Monday, 10 o'clock, and we'll do a bit of a recap of what we've done today, and then we'll crack on with the posterior musculature. I'll see you then.